Hey, what's up, everybody? Welcome into the show. Yet another episode of Crushing Fantasy Football. I am Bryce Lockridge, your host of the show. All right, guys, today we are going to be going over 5 players that I see going out the board in rounds 2 and 3, and I cringe when I see it. I don't like these guys being drafted so early, so I want to make sure that you avoid these guys because these guys are going to be a colossal bust, especially considering, the fact that they're going in rounds 2 and 3. So I want to make sure that you guys avoid these guys. So I'm going to start right here with the first player on my list, and that's Mark Andrews. Now, what we know about Mark Andrews is that this dude is an absolute target hog. This dude saw a 29% team target share last season. This is very impressive from the tight end position. But the problem with Mark Andrews is as good as he's been in recent years, it's really only been because of elite target share. This dude doesn't have elite run after the catch abilities like guys like Travis Kelce and Darren Waller. Last year, he only had 255 yards after the catch, which was 13th at the tight end position. The only good yards after catch season that he had was 2021. And that was when, he had pretty much his best season, right? In 2021, he was third in the league in yards after the catch. But you go back to 2020, and he was 22nd in yards after the catch. So notoriously, this guy is not that great of a run after catch tight end. He dominates because of elite target share and elite red zone target share. But the problem with that is his target share is going to be down significantly. We've got Odell Beckham. We've got Zay Flowers. We've got a second-year Rashad Bateman, okay? A healthy J.K. Dobbins. This is a problem. There are too many other offensive weapons in this offense for him to get anywhere close to a 29% team target share this season. It's not going to happen. He's going to lose about 4 to 5% in his overall team target share. It's more realistic that he has around a 24% team target share this season, which is not nearly going to get you the production as a 29% team target share, especially considering the fact that he doesn't run after the catch as well as some of the other elite tight ends in fantasy. This guy's a massive avoid because he needs elite target share to dominate. People are fooled by the fact that he's been so good in recent years. And yes, he has been awesome, and he's a very good football player. Don't get me wrong, but don't let these recent years fool you. This Ravens team, they didn't have any wide receiving weapons. Now they do. His target share is going to go way down. He's not going to be nearly the fantasy asset that he was when he was being force-fed the ball. He has no business going around 2 or 3. He's going to be a huge bust. Next player on my list is going to be Terry McLaurin. Now, Terry McLaurin has never finished a season within the top 20 in fantasy points per game. He's never been inside the top 20 at the wide receiver position in fantasy points per game, yet he goes in the top 20 wide receivers every single year in the draft. Thus, he never returns value. He probably never will, especially considering the fact that the team acquired Jahan Dotson. He cut into Terry McLaurin's target share significantly last season. Terry McLaurin only had a 22.6% team target share, which was 27th in the NFL, only 77 receptions, 21st. None of these numbers justified Terry McLaurin being taken in round 2 or in round 3. He's never going in round 2, but a lot of times he's going in round 3, sometimes round 4. He's going early. He has no business going this early in drafts. He's never had a season where he's had more than 5 touchdowns. Jahan Dotson comes in his very first season on the team and has 7, right? Terry McLaurin, obviously his other numbers were better than Jahan Dotson last year as far as his overall target share, his receiving yards and everything like that. But this dude really doesn't produce good touchdown upside because the offense that he's in is just not that good. Probably still won't be that good this year. They've obviously got some weapons and some sneaky upside, but I would bet on them being an average offense at best. Thus, the touchdown upside is not there. The yards per route run efficiency is not good at all, 2.17 yards per route run. He's not producing great yards per route run efficiency. So although on paper and by the eye test, this guy's a very talented wide receiver, he really doesn't produce that efficient of numbers in any way, shape, or form in fantasy. This guy is a massive avoid. He never returns his ADP value. Do not draft Terry McLaurin. Next player on my list is Joe Mixon. Now, I talked about Joe Mixon the other day, and, I was looking back at his career efficiency numbers. 4.1 yards per carry in his career. This dude is not nearly as efficient as people think he is, all right? Talented running back, I guess, right? But he's not the player that he once was, right? Last year, 3.9 yards per carry, despite his offensive line having a pretty good run blocking rating. So they were creating holes for him to run through, and he was still only averaging 3.9 yards per carry. Now he's 27 years old. He's over 1,300 career carries. So with 4.1 yards per carry from a career-long standpoint, do you really expect that yards per carry efficiency to get better this season in his age 27 season when he's had over 1,300 receiving yards? I don't think so. The efficiency is going to be terrible once again. Last year, he saw 60 receptions, which is the most receptions he's seen in his entire fantasy career. This is a good sign, but yet he still didn't have a high finish at the running back position. And if it weren't for that crazy week where he had 5 touchdowns, well, he wouldn't have had a good season at all. It would have looked like he was, an even bigger bust. And so that one huge game makes it kind of deceiving and makes it look like, well, Joe Mixon was actually pretty good. No, he wasn't. You take out that one game or even cut that game in half, and his fantasy numbers for the year were absolutely terrible. Now they have Chase Brown, who's going to end up cutting into his opportunity share. Do not draft Joe Mixon. Wait, draft Chase Brown in the later rounds. It's 100 times better of a value. And Joe Mixon going off the board in round 2, 3, it's just absolute nonsense. Next player on my list is going to be DK Metcalf. Now, DK Metcalf, you look at last season, right? He had a 25.5% team target share, which was 18th in the NFL. This is not good. His yards per route run efficiency was bad, 1.93 yards per route run, which was 34th in the NFL. And so when you think of DK Metcalf, you think, well, he might be kind of inconsistent, but he's going to be one of those guys that comes out and gives you those massive ceiling weeks where he gets a ton of fantasy points. And for best ball formats or even redraft formats, when you need to, or when you know when to plug him into your lineup, he can be a weapon, right? But if you look at last season, he presented absolutely no ceiling, zero. He only had one spike week, meaning a week of 25 fantasy points or more at the wide receiver position for PPR formats. That was week 13 against the Rams. He had 26.7 fantasy points. That's the only spike week he had all season. He presented absolutely no ceiling, and he has a very low floor as well because he's going to have weeks where he does absolutely nothing because the team acquired Jackson Smith and Jigba. They drafted Jackson Smith and Jigba. He's going to cut into DK Metcalf's target share, even though he's lining up out of the slots. It's less targets to go around for DK Metcalf. And you've also got to look at the fact that, Tyler Lockett, despite everyone trying to write him off, is still going to get a significant target share in this offense as well. DK Metcalf, he's just not going to have the target share he needs to be elite. Even with a top 8 target share, a top 18 target share last season, which was, average, he just wasn't a productive fantasy wide receiver. He wasn't reliable. He presented absolutely no ceiling. The floor is bad. The ceiling is bad. He's overrated because of his athletic intangibles. He's one of those guys that he comes out and, look at the guy. He's huge, he's strong, he's fast, very impressive on paper and by the eye test, but he just never equates this to actual fantasy production. This dude is overdrafted every single year because of his athletic intangibles and because of, the fact that he's just an elite athletic specimen. But it never translates to fantasy. Never translates to fantasy is what I'm saying. So don't draft DK Metcalf. He is a massive avoid. His athleticism does not translate into fantasy points. Next and final player on my list is going to be Deebo Samuel. Now, of all the players that I have on this list, I think that I hate Deebo Samuel the most, honestly. I mean, you look at his 2021 season, and everyone's riding that high from the 2021 season where he had 14 total touchdowns. It was just an absolute fantasy beast. But if you look at that season, it was probably the flukiest season I have ever seen at any position in the history of fantasy football. This dude had 8 rushing touchdowns, more rushing touchdowns than receiving touchdowns at the wide receiver position. This is utterly ridiculous. And we know that this is never going to happen again as long as the running backs on this team are healthy. If Christian McCaffrey and Elijah Mitchell are both healthy, Deebo Samuel's not going to get that kind of rushing opportunity. All right? He's not going to be used. He's not even going to get 50% of the amount of carries he did in the 2021 season when the team had all kinds of injuries and problems at the running back position. This was fluky, right? 8 rushing touchdowns, not going to happen again. And then if you look at his receiving touchdowns, yes, he had 6 receiving touchdowns. And so this was decent as far as his receiving touchdowns, but 3 out of the 6 were 45-yard plays or longer, 45-yard touchdown receptions or longer. This dude has awesome big playability, and that's why he's able to create plays like this. But this is not the kind of thing that's sustainable over a year-to-year basis, right? If all his touchdowns are coming on rushing touchdowns or big plays, well, that's not going to repeat, right? He's not going to be able to produce those big plays year in and year out and get that many receiving touchdowns unless his red zone target share goes up, and he does not get targeted that heavily in the red zone. They target Brandon Ayuk and George Kittle more when they get in the red zone than they do Deebo Samuel. So unless he's producing these freakishly big plays, he's not reliable. His best game last year, 17.7 fantasy points. What kind of ceiling is that? It's absolutely terrible. I called him being a bust going into the season because, well, he needs big plays to thrive. He needs rushing touchdowns to thrive. These are things that are not going to be repeatable on a year-to-year basis. That 2021 season was an absolute fluke. I'm not saying he's not talented, but the way in which he got all his touchdowns was incredibly fluky. It's never going to happen again. It's the best season that Deebo Samuel will ever have by a long shot, everybody's still riding that high, and that's absolutely ridiculous, okay? This dude was a massive bust last season. He's going to be a massive bust this season. Avoid Deebo Samuel in the early rounds. All right, guys, those are my 5 players that are going off the board in rounds 2 or 3. And, you know, you just got to avoid these guys, right? I mean, they're going to be a massive bust. People are drafting them for all the wrong reasons. So I want to make sure that you guys avoid that mistake. All right, guys, just to let you know, if you haven't heard already, I launched a Patreon for my channel, right? If you want cutting-edge advice, elite rankings that aren't just copy and paste rankings from last year and actually involve a lot of thought and research, go over to my Patreon. You're going to get some of the best rankings. I have my top 70 PPR rankings up for every position for the entire season right now. It's going to be an incredible, useful tool for you. It's going to give you a massive advantage. And then, of course, one of the best things about my Patreon is any question that you have in fantasy football, you join the Patreon, you go in, you send me a message or a comment, ask me a question, and I'll get back to you really quickly with an answer to your specific question in video format. You can ask anyone that's on my Patreon right now. They ask me any question they want, and I get back to them really quickly with a detailed answer to their question in video format. So, while I try to give information to everyone on YouTube, and that's why I look for the most relevant thing that I can talk about that's going to cater to everyone and, just be the best piece of information. When you go over to my Patreon, you can ask a question that is specific to your needs for fantasy, and I will get back to you with a detailed answer to your specific question in video format. It's an incredibly useful tool. Go join the Patreon. I'm going to post the link in the comment section below to go join the Patreon. So click. It's a dirt cheap $5 a month. If you want sports betting included on top of that, it's $10 a month. It's dirt cheap for league-winning advice. It's going to be profitable for you this season to spend the $5 a month because it's going to help you win multiple leagues. All right, guys. Appreciate it. Catch you later.